welcome to the Amazing Tradies Business Show, a Stronger Than My Excuses web TV series production. My name's Marcus Crowick and I'll be your host for this show and this series of 8 shows that we're producing. We're coming to you from the wonderful East Maitland Bowling Club in East Maitland, New South Wales, and we'd like to thank them for providing us with this space that we're using for filming. I'd also like to thank Andy, who is our videographer and editor for this series of shows. Our aim with this series of shows is to address issues that have been raised with us by tradies and other business owners along the way. Today we're going to be talking about mental health, about staying sane with the stresses and strains of being in business. And I'd like to introduce our guests to you who are going to be talking to us today. Firstly, we have Casey Van Zelst Stokes, who is the owner of Haven Productions, an event management company. She's also the tradie wife and partner with her husband Bo in Revolution Pest Management. Welcome, Casey.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good.
Excellent. We've also got Lorraine Rodgick, who's a WH&S expert, been in the industry for years. Her company is Logic Business Resources. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you, Marcus.
Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
An old mate of mine, Bill Annesley. Bill's been a business coach for 20 years. He's one of our team at Amazing Tradies, helping business owners out there make the most of their lives. Bill, welcome along.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic to have you here. Bill has also been a counsellor with Lifeline, so it's an extra special part that he adds to the show. And bearing that in mind, Bill, I'm going to start with you with our first question when it comes to when we're talking about mental health. What do we mean by mental health?
Yeah, there's probably, it's a bit of a broad meaning actually. It's probably a bit of confusion out there with it. I mean, basically mental health is a state of well-being. It can be defined as, but there are conditions of mental health, which is depression and schizophrenia and stuff like that. So I suppose the best way to define it is that the mental health is actually at one spectrum, and other conditions can be down towards the other end.
Yep.
So the idea, I suppose, mental health is normal well-being, living a healthy life, and so forth. So I think that's what it's best described as. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Lorraine, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in my role, the mental health in the workplace is pretty much the opposite of physical health. It's the stuff that we can't see but that we can feel. So easily unidentified, easily ignored, easily put away for another day type of thing, and then suddenly things build up. So the physical health was always legislated quite well since the early 80s. Legislation for mental health only came in for employers, in the last decade or so, and has become stronger over the years. So the focus is much stronger. But yeah, there is a definite line between the mental and physical health.
So can I just ask there, when you're talking about the legislation for mental health, again, in the government's definition of mental health that Bill mentioned, about it's the gamut. It's about being healthy mentally.
Yes.
But also there's the things like depression in there. So
yes.
When it comes to that legislation,
so the legislation always stated when it came to someone's physical health that, as the employer, it is our responsibility and legal obligation to ensure that everyone physically goes home the way they arrive to work. Mm-hmm. So no one is injured at work. Yep. Now the legislation states that mental health is to be treated in exactly the same way. If someone enters your workforce with a healthy mental health, then they are expected to go home that way. So things like anxiety and depression can be introduced by the workplace. And so just like physical health, it becomes a workers' compensation claim. Right. And just like physical health, specialists in those areas are provided to that injured party.
So we're saying both physically and mentally, as employers, we have a responsibility to make sure people are as healthy as they can be.
Absolutely.
Coming to work with us.
100%.
Thank you. Casey, for you, when it comes to mental health, you're running your own business and you've got a husband out there actually engaged running his tradie business. What's it mean to you?
I mean, for us, it's a lot about just dealing with the stress that comes with all of those aspects. My husband has had issues in the past with his mental health. I've had issues with my mental health in the past. So ours are very different definitions to ourselves individually. From a broad perspective, like these guys said, it is like a scale, and there's no one way to really define it, I don't think.
Yeah. So when you're talking about that having issues, it's like we recognise somebody isn't physically healthy because they're sick or they have a broken leg, and the same thing seems to happen when it comes to mental health, that we're recognising it when there's a problem, if we call it that, when we're not as mentally healthy as we can be. Is that right? So what would be some of the main problems, Lorraine, if I can go to you first, the problems, the issues that arise with mental health?
The problems that arise with mental health, from what I've been exposed to, is the lack of identification.
Okay.
So people continue to conduct their works with their mental health being strained, and that is the start of mental health challenges. So obviously things untreated and ignored escalate into other bigger problems. So the main problem with mental health for tradies, if I can be specific and a little bit sexist, is that, most tradies are men. Most men have been raised to not cry, to not show sadness, to not show, any level of negative emotion.
Yes.
So when a tradie decides to go out on his own and be a tradie and make a name for himself, and he takes the family along with him for that journey, the wife often gives up her career and becomes the bookkeeper and the admin support and the person that books the jobs, and then there's this man that is not allowed to show any negative emotion, that needs to deal with the strain of all of, running the business and everything, and then that issue, that mental health challenge remains unidentified, therefore there's no treatment, and then there's that dominoes effect where things spill over.
So is the issue there that the strain is something that isn't being shared, that it's being bottled up? Is that?
Absolutely. So just like anything else, put enough pressure on it and it explodes. Yeah. And the brain is no different, the heart is no different, and just being able to express emotion can be just enough of a release so that it doesn't escalate into a mental health challenge. Yeah. So that's a cultural thing that needs to happen with society and so forth. So there's all these other contributing factors to that.
Casey, have you got something to add to that?
Like Lorraine said, I think it's something like anywhere from 60 to 90% of trade businesses, depending on what specific trade it is, are dominated by men, and we are raised in a society where men can't show emotion, they can't do those things, and they can't even acknowledge that there could be a problem. I mean, my husband and even myself, I have multiple jobs. I raise my child, all these other things, and I feel myself getting stressed and bogged down, but then I also don't want to tell my husband that I'm feeling like that, because he's running around the countryside getting as many jobs done as possible to bring money in to support everyone, and it's a domino effect. I mean, one day of me ignoring the work because I don't feel up to it can lead to catastrophic failure.
I think a lot of things that might come out of it is the word escape. I mean, they've got nowhere to turn sometimes, or someone to talk to. Then you start venturing down the hill of alcohol and drugs and so forth. Because that's their escape, just to get away from it, and then so that even blows up anymore, and then you can head to dire circumstances.
Yeah.
As it's.
So Bill, Lorraine's mentioned keeping things bottled up. So there's the strain of just keeping it to yourself. Casey's touched on that as well as from what you're saying, Casey. I think the financial strain that comes from people trying to work to bring it up. And we mentioned that trades, as we perceive them, are dominated by male. In my definition of trades, it's somebody plying their trade. So whilst we tend to work in Amazing Tradies with people in construction hats and electricians and those sort of things, at the same time, Bill, you've worked with a number of hairdressers, beauticians, dominated by females in that industry.
Absolutely.
The same problems still occur there?
Absolutely, yeah, without a doubt. It's like you're caught into a kind of circle, it's just you're on the treadmill, I suppose, and And yeah, it's not an opportunity to kind of offload that stuff sometimes. I think one of the challenges can also be, I think there has to be some education there in regards to the business owner, in regards to his employees and whether he can pick up the signs.
Yeah,
You know,
okay. So we'll have a look about that. Lorraine, what were you going to
Well,
say?
you know, just from what Bill was saying, you know, what we mentioned earlier was that men are raised to not show those emotions, and you know, when they do, they're showing their feminine side,
Okay.
which adds a level of shame to a man, because to show femininity is to be less manly. You know, and then for women that are dealing with the same challenges, well, the common denominator there is you're running your own business, and it is a small business. And I think the weight of responsibility that on the success or failure of the business weighs very, very heavily, especially when you've taken the family along with you on the journey and you don't have another income to rely on. It can be a very, very lonely world because most of your mates are not running businesses. So who do you have a chat with about those running business stresses?
Sure.
You know, so finding that, you know, the opportunity to bond with people that understand what you're going through, so that it's not so lonely, it's not so isolating. You know.
That's, sorry to cut you off,
No, you're
Lorraine,
right.
but that's one of the things that you do when you're working with businesses, and I know Bill does in working with businesses, and I do, becoming that outside person that
Absolutely.
they talk to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's so imperatively important, and it's good to always choose people that's outside the business that you can go to, that are well informed and that can give you support and direction. So, you know, we mentioned earlier about early warning signs, and there's a myriad of those. But, you know, going to the Beyond Blue website, there is a one-page checklist that anyone can fill out, and it will, the answer of that checklist, which however you've responded to it, will tell you, are you on the cusp of having a mental health challenge? Should you be getting help? You know, when you click that button, yes, well then there's a whole list of people. There's also that networking aspect that small businesses should really get into, like Amazing Tradies, where people once a month or whatever the frequency may be, it's scheduled in their calendar like a job is. I'm going to go and take care of me.
Yeah.
And
okay.
going to these networking forums is taking care of you. Yes, it gives you an opportunity to focus on the business because you're working in the business too much, but it also gives you an opportunity to talk to other men that are in the same situation as yourself.
The key word you mentioned was loneliness, and the business owner's a lonely world. And I think in a way that's how Lifeline's developed quite a bit, as regards to a contact where people are sitting at home by themselves at 9 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. This can be a business owner too. After it's all done and the family's gone to bed, he's sitting there and so that's connection again, just trying to offload what's going on with it.
So again, if we come back to it, we started with the people not feeling that they can express themselves, and you mentioned that, Lorraine, that they need somebody to talk to. People have got to learn that it's okay to open up, find that there's somewhere to open up. Bill, you've mentioned the time frames there about, you know, why is it occurring? Because the business owner is going to work on the tools, coming home, doing the books, doing invoices at 1 a.m. in the morning. Casey, why else do you see that it's occurring? Well, are there mental health issues? Why aren't we as mentally healthy as we can be?
I honestly think that, like, obviously there's a number of contributing factors, everything from clients all the way up to just general job stresses, things not being delivered on time. Everything just adds that little bit of a layer on to the end of the day where you come home and you just want to go to bed or sit down and do something mindless, and then you're putting yourself behind it again.
So we've actually got too much on our plate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not enough people know that if you have the ability to, then you should outsource some of it if you have the ability to.
Yeah. So as soon as you can, start outsourcing some things along the way.
Yeah.
That's one way to resolve it.
Or sometimes even reprioritising. If you're not in a position in your business yet where you can afford to outsource functions, then what is that person supposed to do? Yeah. And sometimes it just comes down to reprioritising what's important on the list. you know. So every small business owner feels the absolute need that they have to work in the business constantly, and the level of guilt that they deal with when they're not working in the business is huge, and that in itself adds pressure.
Right.
So the pressure vessel keeps growing. I need to work on the business, but I haven't got time because I've got to work in the business. And now after working 16 hours a day in the business, dealing with recall work, rostering, financials, you know, budgets, then my energy is now spent, and now I've got children and a wife that I've got no energy for.
Yeah.
And so the guilt and the pressure of not being, or feeling that you're not being a great dad, or feeling that you're not being a great partner, that also adds to that pressure vessel. So then you've got this massive pressure cooker of all these different variables. And I think, you know, sometimes people just need to stop.
Yeah, okay, and Bill, your experience in business coaching,
Well,
because as Lorraine says, that's the
spot
common,
on. Yeah, hit the nail on
what's
the head.
happening all the time. So
Yeah.
when it comes to how do we resolve it, what's your advice to people there? How do they move from working 18-hour days because they're spending 10 hours on the tools, coming home doing books, or offloading it onto their partner who really isn't a bookkeeper, and people don't necessarily understand how technical bookkeeping can be? You know, how do they resolve that?
Yeah, because they are the business and what they need to do. And that's, I suppose, where coaching helps a lot, because there's someone outside the business. I mean, quite often, I'm coaching one client for 10 years and, you know, it was reflecting on his family. And the fact that he had someone to talk to about that would make him feel a bit better. The fact that the problems he had of you know, in the business with these team, you know, to talk about that outside was a powerful thing. And the thing that comes out of it all, probably, as you said, working in the business, work on it, is that time management. I mean, you only got to go to Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants, and he talks about where you plan before you act. But quite often we don't. We're caught in that urgent. And
we'll talk about this when we do our cash
Yeah.
flow show, which will be the third in the series, Bill. But there is that part where the business owner feels like they've got to go to work and do more and more work to bring the money in. Is there a place for saying, well, you've just got to stop and plan or do other things? Because they're looking at it going, well, I've got 10 hours to work and bill out for the day. How does stopping and planning actually bring me in the money?
They want to. Well, it's a. That's where it's about, as the business got proper systems. Does he need to bring a manager in where he can delegate a lot of that work, and that puts him working on the business. It goes back to the same things, I think. But the big problem I think the owner has there is no one is as good as him.
Right.
And that's
Technically, you mean on the tools.
Yeah. So it's getting him to let go. And
So we've covered off a few things there with the not people keeping it in. That we need to work with people, educate people on it's okay to let it out. I might mention in there, I think we see that more in football. I mean, when you and I were growing up, Bill, guys didn't hug one another. They gave each other a pat on the back and shook hands. Now we see more of that emotion coming out in things like football.
Yeah.
So we've got that where we've got to, people have to be okay with opening up. They've got to educate themselves about stopping and doing some work.
It's huge now with football or rugby league. You're seeing international footballers affected by depression, and it's starting to come out now. You see Greg Inglis and people like that. As soon as they were injured and weren't being able to be out there in front of the crowds, something was missing and they couldn't grasp. They lost their direction probably.
Right. So we are seeing
favours.
that being publicly broadcast now that well-known people are having issues where they're not as mentally healthy as we would love them to be, and their exposure is helping people out. Before we go to the actions to take, because it's what we want people to walk away with, is how do we take action? We say stronger than my excuses, but we're not labelling it like that. We're saying here's some actions to take. Resolving it, if there was one thing to do to resolve it, Bill, what action can people take?
Listen, you know. Just listen.
So to the person,
Yes,
to the
yeah,
tradie, to the business
tradie.
owner, be prepared to listen.
And just listen. Yeah, I think that's the best thing you can do. I mean, you're not the solution provider actually.
Right.
You're not expecting to bring them to another level or anything like that. All they need is listening, and then from there, empathise and have your thought about. And
so that I
see 'em.
take it from you
Yeah.
is also coming from your experience at Lifeline. You're
Correct.
not there to solve the problem,
No.
which particularly us males like to do. Here's 4 steps to solve your problem.
Well, that's so true. I mean, so guilty. My wife comes home from work and she'll tell me what happened at work, and I start giving reasons, what you could do and what you couldn't, and she gets pretty cranky because all she wants to do is dump on me, and that's all she wants. And after that, she feels good, so she
Yeah.
doesn't want me to solve the
Okay,
war for
so
her.
number one from you, the thing that people need to do is listen to those that are in that space. Just give them the time. Listen. Lorraine, for you, what action can we
Okay.
take? What's a word or a specific action for people to take?
So for the resolution aspect, just if the takeaway could be that there is no one solution, that it actually takes a team of solutions to come together, a team of aspects to come together to
Right.
be a solution. But the first step has to be understanding that don't worry about the symptoms of the mental health. We need to deal with the cause of the mental health challenge. And to do that, you need those forums to open up and have those conversations and be identified. So understand as well that if you're going to continue to ignore it, then you're going to be running the business on less fuel. It feels like you're doing a hell of a lot more, but there's a lot less efficiency. So, having that balance and pulling back, trying to achieve some work-life balance, trying to take yourself out of the business a little bit, taking a moment for yourself is so important. And all over health is very important. So physical health is very important. It does affect mental health. So there is a direct correlation.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lorraine. And Casey, for you, what's the one action or word that you can put in place for us to help resolve these issues?
For me, I guess it would be, for me personally, it would be family. So for us, we have our phones on Do Not Disturb after a certain time of day, and they don't wake up again until 7 in the morning. We carve out time in our diaries and schedule time like a business meeting or a job to make sure that my partner and I can be together and that we're spending enough time with our daughter, and we're not letting, we do have these pressures of the business and everything around it, but as long as we're in those times, we're in those times. We don't, we try not to take phone calls unless they're urgent. And I find that helps alleviate even some of the end of day tension that you feel. It's not going to completely resolve the problem, but it's going to help refuel a little bit, I guess, for the next day.
That is absolutely
awesome. So you're saying be present in the moment.
Yes.
So work's work, home's home.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn, one of the greatest mentors ever, said that you need to go to work and be at work, and when you're at home, be at home.
And I understand that people most of the time work from home, so they're going
Yeah.
to have their office in
Harder and
home,
harder.
so you close the door.
Just
Yeah.
blurs.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
So that's the. I do
have
the
you-
same
have you
thing.
cut
My
off time?
phone from 8 till 8 goes on Do Not Disturb, except for family. But I'll leave it in my office. I work from home. My home office. I close the door. I'll leave it in there. Yeah. Simon Sinek, famous for Start With Why, talks about turning your phone off, and he doesn't have his in his bedroom at all. He says you can have these old-fashioned things called alarm clocks that will wake you up. So if we go back to that, Bill, just to wrap it up, number one is for other people to listen, just to be there for people. Lorraine, for you, if you summarised what you were saying into one word.
Identify cause.
Okay, listen, identify cause, and
Family? Scheduling.
beautiful. Thanks, guys. They're good things to do. We're all here to help people have better lives. I'm a great believer that everything is about life. Work is a subset of life, so make the most of it. Contact us for any help that we might be able to offer you. I'd like to thank my guests for being on here today. Again, Casey, Lorraine and Bill, thanks very much for coming along and sharing your expertise. Thanks to our sponsors, East Maitland Bowling Club, again for providing this wonderful space for us to be in, to Andy for videoing and editing the production. And you can find all of this, you can find links to Beyond Blue, Lifeline, other things we'll be putting on our social media. Go to social media and watch wherever you're watching the shows, you feel free to make a comment, ask a question, join our amazing Tradies group on Facebook and we can help you out. Thanks very much. See you next time.